Alright guys, welcome to another video. Today we're going to take a look at some exercises that I've prepared for you for your programming course. Okay, so these questions are pretty simple as long as you break down the problem into smaller parts, into parts that you recognize and know how to do. Every time you approach a programming question, you should try and break it down and see the parts that you actually know how to do, see what variables you might need, and try and think ahead. Try and think of what we will probably need to store and what we will probably need to reuse later. Okay, so I'm going to start things off with some simple questions, and then we're going to keep on gradually building up to the harder ones. Okay, so today I've got a Word document with a few questions. So this is the first one, and it says create a program that will ask a user to input a number. So input's a key word here, okay? A number. If it is below, if here is another keyword, okay? If it is below 50, output the text fail. So we have to output, I'm going to highlight these, output the text fail. Okay, and if it is 50 or above, output the text pass. So here we go. So on first inspection, since there's no loop or there's no repetition, it's only asking for the user to input a number, so it's one number. We won't need a loop. Okay. But we're asked for inputs, so that should trigger us. I'm going to add some bullets here. So to input basically means write ln and some text. Okay. And the text would be something along the well, I'm going to say write ln plus, I don't know, enter a number. Okay. But it also means we need to store it. If the user is inputting a number, it means we need to store it somewhere. So we need a variable. So we need a input again, a variable, maybe something like number, num, or anything you want. Okay, so this here is to ask for a number, and this one here is to store that number. Okay. Oops. And then let's take a look at the next part. It says if, so that means conditional statement. We need an if clause. Okay. And we need to check if the number is greater or equal to 50 and check if it is below that, below 50. Okay, so this is pretty much all we need to do. Okay, so now that I have my plan and I've understood the question, all I have to do now is go into Pascal. So here it is. Let's just zoom in, and I'm going to call this one program X1. Okay. And I'm going to build my structure. So I'm going to type here begin, and at the bottom end, like so. And if I check back in my document, we're going to need a statement to ask for a number, and then we're going to need a statement to store that number. So I need a variable. This is very important. Okay. So we need a variable, and we're going to call it either number or num or something else that makes sense to you. It could be called potato if you want. It doesn't matter. So I'm going to come here, and I'm going to write my variable. So I'm going to call it num. And I'm going to say it's of type integer because, well, the question didn't say whether it wants whole numbers or decimals, and by the looks of it, since it says 50 and it's not 50.00, it's probably implying whole numbers. Okay, so I've given it a value. Sorry, I've given a variable name of num, and it's of type integer. Now, when I start the program, I'm going to give num a default value. So the default value will be 0. So when the program starts, it will create the variable, and then it will give the variable a value of 0. Okay, now let's move on to the stuff that you guys definitely know. I need to write a message on the screen that will ask for a number. So I'm going to type here, write ln. I'm going to open parenthesis, single quote, and I'm going to say enter a number, like so. Okay, and then I want to store this number, so I'm going to go to readln, and I want to store this number, whatever the user types in, I want to store it in the variable num. So I'm going to type in num, like so. Okay, now here's the tricky part, or the part that some of you might get confused. We need to make a conditional statement to check for what the user put into the program. Now we have the num that's holding the number. It's storing it for us. So the user entered a number. Pascal can't remember that number by itself, so we have to store it in num, and then we have to compare. What does num have inside? Is it bigger than 50? Is it less than 50? We need to make a conditional statement. So to do that, we're going to type if, and then I'm going to say num is greater or equal to 50. Then I'm going to type a little begin and an end statement, like so. Then I want to display the message. If it's bigger or equal to 50, then we need to type pass. I took an opposite route. Okay, so I'm going to write ln. I'm going to type in pass, like so. And then I'm going to close parenthesis, and I'm going to go to the next statement. Now, since there's only two outcomes to this program, it's either 50 or above or below 50, I'm going to type in an else statement. Whoops. And this means that in all other cases, so basically in the opposite case, write ln. I'm going to put a begin and an end again. Begin and end. And I'm going to put write ln, and I'm going to type in fail. Oops. Now notice that I'm going to put a bit of spacing because it should look a bit clearer. So take a look at this. There we go. So this is the program, and it starts from the top, from line 1. So when the program gets executed, the first thing that it will do is it will create the variable and define the data type of integer. Then the program will define the variable num, which is what we created in just up here. It will define it as having the value 0. So num now has the value of 0. Or every time we see the word num, it's like we're saying 0. And then we're going to say the program's going to ask the user to enter a number. Okay, this is going to appear on the screen. The moment that the user types in the number and presses enter, okay, whatever the user wrote will be put inside num. So number will no longer be 0. It will be whatever the user typed in. So let's imagine that the user typed in the number 52. Num will now be equal to 52. This will not be true anymore. This will be 52. Okay? So anything inside num, if the user typed in the number 52, will be 52. So once that's stored in num, then it will come to line 11, and it will check to see if num, so if 52, is bigger or equal to 50, which in this case it is, then it will go and do this stuff. Okay? It will go and write on the screen pass. Okay? Now notice that after this statement, I don't have a semicolon, and after this one, I also don't have a semicolon, because I've used an else statement. If I had put a semicolon here and here, the if would stop here. It wouldn't continue on to this part, and we're most likely to get an error when we try and compile it. Okay, so if you're using an if-else statement, anything before the else in the if part, okay, doesn't require semicolons. Okay, now let's say that we'll go to the top again. Since the user wrote a number, sorry, before we go to the top, since the user wrote 52 and number was 52, the program came here and it output the message pass, okay? And it doesn't need to go any further down because we already know that it's greater than 50. So this statement here is for anything below 50. So this will get ignored and the program will end. If I want the message pass to remain on screen, I can put a readln here and the readln here. Okay, so these messages will remain on screen, or I could get rid of that and I could get rid of that. I could just put a readln outside of my if. So that means I save a bit of writing, and whatever happens, whatever one of these two happens, it will remain on screen because we've put a readln at the end of the program. Now, what happens if the user types in a number like 0? So if the program will begin, num will have a value of 0, and then we have the statement enter a number. This will appear on the screen. If the user types in 0 and presses enter, the value of num is 0. So whenever we see the word num now, it is equal to 0. And then it will come to this check, and it will say, is num basically greater or equal to 50? Well, it's 0, so num is 0, and this is not true. Okay, so all of this will be ignored now. Okay, because num is not greater or equal to 50. Num is is 0. So that means that we will move on to the next part of the program. We'll come into the else statement, okay, and we will write the message fail. And then we'll do a readln to make sure that that stays on the screen. I'm going to compile it, and I'm going to call it X1, and I'm going to execute it. If everything's okay, perfect, there's no errors. So I'm going to execute it, and let's see what happens in both cases. I'm going to zoom out a little bit so that we can see the whole program. Well, actually, I'm going to remove some spaces. There we go, like so. And then we can zoom in a bit more again. There we go. So I'm going to execute the program, and let's take a look. I need to zoom into this. Okay, so it's asking me to enter a number, and we can see that Pascal has already done this. Okay, if you want to actually, you know what, let's see if this is actually happening. How can we prove that Pascal is defining the value of num to 0 when we begin, before we're asking for the user to enter a number? Well, that's quite simple. I'm going to close this. If I want to see whether or not Pascal is doing this, I can check to see what's inside num by just writing a simple write-ln statement. And I'm going to write the program has just started. The value of num is currently, I'm going to put colon, comma, oops, I'm going to leave a space actually, and then I'm going to put single quote, comma. Okay, so this will appear on the screen, and then I want to see what's inside num, so I'm going to type in num, and close parenthesis, and hit that semicolon. So now, when the program starts, it's going to say the program has just started, the value of num is currently, and then it will show me whatever is inside this variable. So it should theoretically show me 0. Okay, so I'm going to press compile and execute one more time. And let's zoom in. So as you can see, the program started, this happened, line 4 happened, and then line 5, just like we wrote, the program has just started, the value of num is currently 0. So it's showing whatever is inside num. I didn't write 0 anywhere here, it's just going here and checking, okay, he put the number 0 in, so I'm showing 0. And then it goes to the next line and it says, enter a number Okay, and whatever we put will be stored in the num variable now. Okay, so I'm going to type in the number 50, like so. Okay, and I'm going to hit enter. The moment I hit enter, it should be stored in the number variable. Okay, here, sorry. So I'm going to press enter, and it was stored in the number variable, and then it came to do the following line. If num is greater or equal to 50, then we'll write pass. If it's not, we'll write fail. Since the number I wrote is 50, okay, and it's stored in num, 50 is greater or equal to 50, so it should show the message pass, which is what happened. And the rest of the program, the rest of the statement, the else, was ignored. Okay, let's try it one more time with a number that's smaller than 50. So I'm going to compile and execute. Again, you can see that when the program starts, the number variable is currently 0, as we set it to be. And we're going to enter a number that's smaller than 50 now. That will be stored in the number variable here. Okay, so I'm going to put 35. Okay, the moment I press enter, 35 will be placed in num. Okay, and then it will move to the next line and it will check, is the number that I wrote, 35, greater or equal to 50? It's definitely not. So the program will ignore this if statement here, and it will move to the else statement, and it should write fail. There you go. Okay, awesome. So that was the first exercise that I'm going to do with you guys. I'm going to keep them short. I'm going to make them into 4 or 5 different little videos, okay, so that they're easy to watch and follow. I hope you've enjoyed this one. Keep on watching, keep on trying, and I'll catch you in the next one.